Hello and welcome back. Today, prepare to be undermined. Hello, welcome back to my world of stuff. My name, it's Paul Mount. I'm very indebted to several of my viewers and subscribers, and if I was a proper YouTuber, I'd have researched their names and so on before I started filming this video, but you know who you are, who recommended this particular show, Undermind, for me to take a look at. And that's one of the great strengths, I think, of this channel now, the community that we have here. People are often throwing suggestions at me of films and TV shows to watch, and I put them all on a list. It's in my head, admittedly, but I will get to all these things in due course. There are so many things that have been suggested to me. Things I've seen before, things I'm aware of that I've not seen, and sometimes even things I've never heard of. That happens occasionally. I always appreciate those suggestions, even if I don't get to them straight away. But it's nice to have that sort of catalogue of things in the background that I can take a look at, especially because this channel is very niche and looks at old TV and old films, and it's very nice, and I do get a real buzz from exploring a show I've not seen before, or reminding you of shows that you might not be aware of or have forgotten about. It's pretty much what this channel is all about. So I'm hugely indebted to those viewers / subscribers who suggested this particular series to me, because although it was sort of in the back of my mind, I'd heard of it and I'd read a couple of little bits about it. I didn't know a great deal about it. So it was really nice to get the chance to actually sit down and watch it. It's actually all on YouTube if you want to see this show. All 11 episodes are on YouTube. The picture quality is what you might expect from something that's been transferred from a DVD, which was unremastered, I believe, when it was released by Network a few years ago. So the quality is variable, and occasionally title sequences are missing and so on. But every episode exists, which is very unusual for a show from this time. Oh, if only every episode from 1965, 66 Doctor Who existed. So we're very lucky that this show exists at all for us to sit and watch it. And watching it today, I was reminded that about this time, ITC and ABC, who made this series, were starting to move into slightly glossier, more cinematic 35mm film production series rather than the studio videotaped type shows which had preceded it and would continue on for decades after this. I think one of the reasons Undermined isn't remembered is because it isn't one of those glossy film shows. It hasn't been a show which people have been invited to revisit, apart from that Network DVD a few years ago. It's not a show that has generated its own cult. It hasn't been a show that people have remembered fondly, because at the time it just wasn't very successful. It was created by Robert Banks Stewart. We know him as Doctor Who fans as the writer of two superb mid-70s Doctor Who serials, The Terror of the Zygons and my beloved Seeds of Doom. But he'd also written at this time for shows like Callan, and he went on to create Shoestring and the extremely popular Jersey set detective series Bergerac, which has been recently rebooted on Channel 5 in a new series starring Damien Maloney, and I think a second series is filming at the moment. But he created Undermind in 1965, and what's interesting about this series is that we can see in it great science fiction themes, classic science fiction themes, ideas which are always revisited in science fiction, even these days, and I'll come to that in a moment. The idea of humanity being subverted or taken over or brainwashed or duplicated or replicated by people who look and seem exactly like us. Most famously, I think, the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers. In fact, all the versions of the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, I think, developed that theme extremely well. On TV, shortly after this series, The Invaders, a Quentin Martin production, aired for a couple of seasons on American television, which was a very similar thing about human-looking aliens who were subverting humanity and ingratiating their way into the human race with a view to overthrowing humanity. Those were themes that were occasionally threaded throughout The X-Files in its prime. And there's a new series which has just started on Apple Plus called Pluribus, which is created by and largely written and directed by Vince Gilligan, who created Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. And that series too is a spin on this sort of thing. In fact, it's a bit more similar to Undermine than some of the other genre shows that I've mentioned, because that is about signals from space which have affected humanity and turned humanity into a very well-behaved, pacifistic, non-criminal, non-warlike hive mind. And a handful of people haven't been affected by this, and it's not exactly their resistance to the alien takeover, but it's how they come to terms with the fact that they are the only true humans left, and how the hive mind is trying to assimilate them in a friendly way to become part of this great conglomeration of well-behaved, well-meaning humanity. So these are ideas that are science fiction staples. And it is quite amusing to see modern critics pouring vast amounts of praise on Pluribus and praising it for its originality. Never seen anything like this before. And they're right, it's a great series. It is a fantastic series, one of my favourite at the moment, but it's not hugely original. And it just goes to show that many of today's cultural commentators who think that they've got their finger on the pulse haven't really, because they're not aware of the history of television and the history of science fiction and the genre. But if you have watched any of these shows, you will watch Undermind and think, yeah, this is a very familiar idea. The first episode sets up the theme of the series. In that first episode, Personnel Officer Drew Herriot, he returns to the United Kingdom after having been working in Australia. He discovers that his brother, who's a police detective named Frank, he's behaving a bit oddly. He's got involved in a street scuffle, and he's very strange and he's very distant and he's distracted. He doesn't seem quite himself. Drew contacts his sister-in-law, Anne. She is separated from Frank, and they investigate together to find out what has happened to Frank. And they discover through the course of the first episode that a disembodied alien force from somewhere up there has been using high-frequency signals to brainwash human beings, including Frank, Drew's brother. And their long-range scheme is to commit subversive acts to unbalance society, particularly in the UK, before launching a full-scale invasion. And the premise of the 11-part series is Drew and Anne working together as the only people who know about this conspiracy and trying to find people who have been brainwashed. They call them the Undermind, and try and find the root cause of this and to try and find some way to stop the planned invasion. The series stars actor Jeremy Wilkin. He's a character actor from the 60s and 70s. Again, Doctor Who connection. He appeared as the Cyberman conspirator Kelman in the early Tom Baker serial Revenge of the Cybermen. Gerry Anderson fans will know his voice work in many of Jerry's 1960s shows, and he would occasionally appear as one of the skydiver operatives in UFO. So a good, solid character actor, but an unusual choice for a lead. I think it's the only lead role he actually had in his career. I stand to be corrected. And I'm not entirely sure he pulls it off. I don't think he has the physicality or the gravitas of performance to carry off this idea of this man who's got this huge weight on his shoulders to try and protect the human race from a threat it can't begin to imagine and can't see. Anne is played by Rosemary Nichols. Now, she went on to be known for her role as Annabelle in Department S, one of the glossy ITC series that followed a couple of years later. That's a role that she wasn't particularly proud of, because if you've ever seen Department S, she's very much the third wheel in the trio of characters. There was Jason King, Stuart Sullivan, and Rosemary Nichols as Annabelle, who I think was supposed to be sort of a computer expert, but she was very much in the background of the series, and she has spoken since of her dissatisfaction with the role and the fact the character wasn't really able to do anything, which is very often the way in those episodic ITC adventure series. So they're the team who work together in Undermind to try and expose these brainwashed humans and put a stop to the alien plot, such as it is. Watching the series now, you are conscious, extremely conscious of the fact that this is a 60-year-old British TV series. It struggles to maintain the attention because the scripts are extremely wordy. There's not a lot of action in it because it is very much studio bound. It's very earnest. It's quite stodgy. Every episode it's a bit like wading through soup. And it's a shame, because I think the idea is actually very interesting and it does develop very well that feeling of who can you trust, the paranoia thing, they're out to get us. Who are they? Who's been taken over? Who's been brainwashed? Who's on your side? Who isn't on your side? And there's actually a very nice twist in the 5th episode, which I won't reveal in case you do decide to watch it, which does make you go, oh, didn't see that coming. And that was very nicely done. And the series does pull the rug under you a couple of times with things that you don't necessarily see happening. It does move the plot in certain ways that do sort of keep you second guessing it. But I think ultimately what is inevitably the problem with it is very, very slow. Its themes of bodily corruption and losing yourself, and which is a great science fiction trope, people losing their own individuality and identity, that is there and present throughout the episodes. and it develops a very nice sense of sort of creeping dread. Every episode has that feeling of, well, who's the undermined, as they call them in this episode? Who's the person who is plotting against humanity? Having said that the production is clunky and stagey, it is. It absolutely is. It's all, pretty much all, studio bound. There's a couple of exterior scenes. There's a scene actually at the very end of the series, which is a location sequence. There's one or two little bits here and there. But it is very, very studio bound. But having said that, the production design is excellent throughout. There are some very, very ambitious and very imaginative sets. There's one episode in which noted thesp Patrick Allen plays a sort of a police investigator, and he's got this headquarters or office complex which is very psychedelic with these sort of black and white walls. And it does quite a lot of what TV did a lot in the 60s and 70s. It built exterior sets in the studio. In the second episode, which features a turn from the great Michael Gough as a priest, and they built sort of an exterior of a church and the bell room and the whole interior with the pews. They built all this stuff very intricately in very detailed sets. There's another episode later on in the series where a pilot has been injured, and Anne goes to visit him in his country cottage with his wife. And you've got the whole of the outside of the house, the walls and the windows. It's literally the frontage of a house. And it's very well designed, the set, in that she goes in through the door and into the living room, which is presumably around the back of the set, and into the kitchen that's beyond that. So there's very well put together, very well designed sets that today, I mean, TV is pretty much all done either on sound stages or a lot of stuff on location these days. To do something like that today, you would just go out to a house and film it there. But they built these really intricate interior, exterior sets. Unfortunately, they never convince us exterior sets because you're aware of the way it's filmed, the way that it's done on video. There's another episode in which they visit the home of a popular children's author. And again, you get the whole front of her house. It's only seen in a couple of brief sequences, but they go to the expense of building this house frontage and this summer house. It's a very odd series from the production point of view because it does fall between those stools. Very ambitious visually in terms of what it's doing in the studio, but because of the fact that it's on video and not on film, it just looks clunky and stagey, and it's not helped by some hammy performances here and there, and two leads who, whilst they have a certain chemistry, aren't necessarily leading figures. They don't necessarily convince as the stars of the show, the lead characters. One of the things I do like about the characters, though, is that the whole weight of this situation is on their shoulders through most of the series. There's very few people they can confide in. They're working on their own, almost like a Mulder and Scully type, investigating to find out who's the new Undermind of the week. And halfway through the series, you sort of do feel the strain that they're suffering, and in particular is driven to the point of distraction by the sheer weight of the responsibility that they both bear. Whereas Drew himself, he's focused and he's almost obsessed. He is very much the Mulder character who's completely obsessed with this conspiracy and following leads and finding out who everybody is and trying to track down a list of the Undermind. He's very focused, whereas she is really struggling under the strain of this situation that they found themselves in that only they know about. Stories themselves are quite an interesting mix across the 11 episodes. And for a series in 1965, they deal with some quite interesting and surprisingly dark and adult situations. There's one episode which centres around the murder of a call girl. She appears to have some intimate knowledge of Drew, but he's never met her. He doesn't know anything about it. This is the Undermind working to undermine him as an enemy of theirs. There's an episode which is surprisingly political, although it's done with some quite excruciating Irish stereotypes, which deals on old animosities about IRA operatives and various conflicts with the mainland over the years. There's one episode which was quite amusing where they meet a character who appears to foretell the future and says that a famous person is going to die publicly, and our heroes find themselves battling to expose and prevent a plot in which Eamon Andrews, the famous presenter of This Is Your Life, is to be killed live on television. The idea there is that the death of somebody so famous is going to really unsettle the British public and thus open the gateway for an alien invasion. Not entirely sure about that one. I think the series really picks up about episode 5. The first few episodes they're all a bit of a plod. They're all a bit stodgy and heavy going. But I think when something happens in episode 4, it suddenly gets a bit more focused and it has a bit more of a direction. It's been a bit aimless before then, but some of the later episodes are quite striking. There's one episode called Song of Death in which medical professionals are killing themselves, committing suicide, and it appears that they've been influenced by a particular tune that they're being exposed to. And perhaps the best episode is the one that involves a children's writer, and the Undermind are using a new character which she has created called Mulligatawny, which is a very creepy sort of fish type thing, which is planting murderous and violent thoughts into the minds of children. I think the problem with the series is a certain lack of focus in terms of what the threat actually is, because it's an unspecified alien threat from another planet. I think that works in a way, but also works against it, because there's nothing tangible apart from the mysterious Undermind people. There's no tangible threat as such, because it's something out there in space. They don't know where it's from. In the last episode, there's some suggestion that it might come from somewhere in Alpha Centauri, light years away. And ultimately, the Undermind are manifested to an extent by the leader of the group, the first person who received these brainwashing signals. But I think the fact that there's no visible threat as such works with it and works against it. It sort of pulls it in two ways. One point you're thinking, well, what exactly is the threat? And then you're also thinking, well, what exactly is the threat? Because it's there, but it's not there. This series was made and transmitted in 1965, and it's interesting to watch the credits because it has significant crossover with Doctor Who. Not only Robert Banks-Stewart, who would work on Doctor Who later, but some of the scripts are written by people who were working on Doctor Who at this time. People like Bill Strutton and David Whittaker. Bill Strutton wrote the notorious Season 2 Doctor Who story, The Web Planet, which had just been transmitting the month before this episode of Undermind that he wrote screened. David Whittaker, Doctor Who's first script editor, he was still working on Doctor Who at the time. When this story was on screen, his story, The Crusade, was about to start around about the same time. And there's also some contributions, particularly the season finale, as it wouldn't have been called at the time, by Robert Holmes, the legendary Doctor Who writer and script editor. So it cherry picks people who were working in the genre in Doctor Who at the time, and that's interesting in itself. And I just find that fascinating. I think I'm watching this, and these people in the credits had been writing Doctor Who about the same time, and Doctor Who episodes that they had written were being aired. There's a lot to recommend in this series, but I'm not entirely sure I can recommend it. There's some great performances in it from some great actors. Having said that, there are some hammy performances. If you're somebody who, like me, likes to see old actors in things, you will see the likes of George Baker in this, Philip Latham, Derek Nimmo, the comedy actor from the late 60s. He appears in a straight role in that creepy story about the malevolent puppet. Great Peter Barkworth is in another. John Barron appears in the last 2 episodes. So it's a great cast of good old British thesps, and I think if you like to see those people on TV, you will enjoy seeing them on this show. I think what let the show down and scuppered any chances it might have had of breaking through and becoming a hit series is that ITV's network didn't support it. It didn't get a network screening. It started airing in May 1965 on some ITV regions, then it started a couple of weeks later in others. 1 or 2 regions played episodes out of order, so there doesn't seem to have been a lot of faith in the show before it even aired. And even though it ends not exactly on a cliffhanger, but ends in a way that almost has the cast saying, please can we have another series? It's quite clear that that wasn't going to happen because the show hadn't been particularly successful. I think one of the problems with the episodes is sometimes the scripts aren't quite as clear as they should be, and because of the studio production, action sequences are very awkward and unconvincing. There's a couple of scenes with guns firing where you don't hear any sound effects, people throwing themselves across sets. A couple of clumsy fight sequences, and sometimes it's just hard to work out exactly what's happened. So I think it's a show that was made with the best of intentions, and for all its faults and its shortcomings, at least they tried to do something like this. It's something I keep going back to, that you can't imagine British television really trying something like this these days. This was just an ITV drama amongst other ITV dramas, lots of ITV dramas that were being made at the time. This one just happened to have a science fiction concept at the heart of it. And that wasn't necessarily considered outrageous or fanciful or too far-fetched for the audience. It was just something that ITV did, and I do miss those days when shows like this would just be made because they were a drama series. So I enjoyed watching it, but if you choose to watch it, as I said, it's all on YouTube. It's not something you will binge. I mean, the reason it's taken me so long to do this video is it's taken me about a month to 6 weeks to get through it all, because the episodes are quite long. They're about 50 minutes and they're laboured, and it feels like a production from another age, because it is. It doesn't have any of the pace or energy or obviously colour, because it's all in black and white, of a series today. But it is always nice to go back and revisit something from the past, especially when it's something that you don't know much about and have not really heard much about or read much about, because it's not been chronicled or written about over the years. It sort of disappeared, and I think it's a shame. But it had a lot going for it, but unfortunately it didn't have quite enough going for it. So it's worth a look, and I cautiously recommend it. If you're interested in the history of television and science fiction, you will probably want to take a look at it. But it's a show that reaches for the stars and doesn't quite get there. Ultimately, I think its ambition goes beyond what it is physically able to achieve. So it ends up just being a very brief and faint footnote in the history of science fiction. But if you are interested in that history, you will probably want to take a look at it. It's not a bad series, but it's an idea that probably deserved more resources. And of course, it deserved the support of the network, which it didn't get when it was screened. That's Undermind. I'm going to give Undermind, I give it 6 out of 10. I did enjoy watching it. I will never watch it again, but I'm glad that I've seen it. And I am, as I've said, very, very grateful to my subscribers who recommended it to me, because it's not something that I would have sought out without your suggestion. So thanks for that. Right, hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, why not think about liking, subscribing to the channel? There's loads of stuff like this on here: classic retro TV, physical media, films, TV, all that sort of stuff. So all you have to do is click the like and subscribe there, or scan that QR code with your phone, and you'll be part of my stuff forever. Well, till you unsubscribe. But don't unsubscribe. Stick around. Right, thank you for watching. I will see you soon with some more stuff. Until I do, well, just keep taking this stuff.